Okay, this week what we'll be doing today, and then we'll continue to next week, is really on this sort of the time value of money. Finance, of course, is such an important part of life and such an important part of business that Excel has, just as they have a lot of built-in statistical functions, Excel actually has a lot of built-in finance. So what we want to do is just to use the built-in Excel finance functions to learn how to address certain finance questions. And so this week and next week, we're starting with the basics, which essentially is learn how to deal with the time value of money questions. You've all done 3227, so you know that the basic sort of framework about the time value of money questions then is that money, $1 today is more valuable than $1 a year from now because you can invest it and earn some sort of interest rate. So if you want to decide whether you should spend your money today or spend your money in a year, so you have $100, should you spend it today or should you save it and spend it for a year? A lot of the time, one factor that will play a role in is what kind of interest rate you get. So the idea then of saving your money and earning an interest rate can be said to be lending the money or investing. On the other hand, if you really need the money now, you could decide that you will spend now and you pay back for it later in the future. So that's that you borrow the money and spend now. Again, the interest rate will play a great role. The graphical representation of this sort of time value of money then kind of looks like this. Generally, with time value of money questions, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables that are under consideration. Right, Nick? You have the present value, which is how much money is worth today. You have the future value, which is how much money it's worth in the future. And the link between these two then is to discount this future value back here. And so there's a number of periods in the future. And finally, the discount rate would be the interest rate, the relevant interest rate, sometimes called the yield to maturity for bonds, sometimes it's called the required rate of return. It has many different names, okay, this interest rate per year. And then every now and then, you have this situation where in between now and the future, there are these equal payments that you receive at equally spaced periods in time. These payments then we call an annuity. But these are the 5 variables that time value of money questions deal with. And so we can ask ourselves, if you are given any 4 of these variables, Excel will help you calculate the 5th. And so Excel has these functions here that will allow you, given any 4 of these, will allow you to calculate the 5th. If you're given the future value, present value, payments, and interest per year, you can calculate the number of periods using the NPER, or number of periods function. If you're given the rest, you can calculate the interest payment per year using rate. To solve for present value, you use PV. We'll be a little bit careful with PV here because this present value function only works then when you have payments that are equal in size and are equally spaced in time. That is annuities. So we'll say that these functions here work when you have what are called even cash flows. That is, the payments are even. If the payments are uneven, if you have $1,000 next year, $1,500 the year after, and so on, these functions don't really work that well. Okay? You need another function, which we'll see later on. So let's use these functions then, and let's say, suppose the present value is 100, and we're looking to find the future value. So let's hide this for now. And let's say, what's our future value? So we'll use the future value function. We have an interest rate of 10%, and we'll go for 5 years. So what's our future value? So we'll use the FV function. Okay. Future value. So the future value asks you for the rate, and our rate then is this guy here. Note that the rate, you put in 10%. You can, of course, put in 0.1. This is different from what goes on your financial calculator. For your financial calculator, if you are going to put in the rate in your calculator, you'd actually put in 10. Whereas here, you're putting in 0.1, the correct number, right? So, 10%. Number of periods is 5. Our payment, in this case, we'll put 0 because we assume you receive $100 in 5 years and there are no payments in between. So we put 0 for our payment. Our present value is 100. And the type, of course, you know what they mean by type, right, Amit? Type. When it comes to cash flows, there are generally 2 types we think of: cash flows that occur at the end of the year, which is the default, and cash flows that occur at the beginning of the year, which is the odd. Oh, so if you go to a number of years, the problem there is that did you figure that out? The font for a number of years was white, so if you typed in a number, it wouldn't show up. So you just changed the font to black. Did it show up for you, Sarah? Did you change it to black? Oh. No, but did you didn't put this 5 in there?
Oh, it's in there, it's just white.
Oh, it's just white, okay. And so the type, if you leave it blank, so if you just close the brackets here, it'll assume that you've put type 0, okay? Where type 0 is end of period, and then type 1 is beginning of period. So that's the default. So if you just leave it blank like that, that'll work as well. It assumes you've put in 0. So we have 165. So we can see that this is actually negative. And this is the same thing that happens with your financial calculator. If the present value is a cash inflow, which is positive, it assumes at the end you take the money out. So you put it into your account, it earns interest, and then you take it out after 5 years. And so this is a cash outflow. So if you want this to be a positive number, then when you're putting it into your formula, either you put in this B6 as a cash outflow in the beginning, or B2, sorry, B2 as a cash outflow, or you can put the negative, so either you put it here to have B2 as a cash outflow, or you can put it here, just see negative. Either one will do. So 161.05. So that answers the question. If you have $100 to invest for 5 years at 10%, how much do you have at the end of the year? You have $161.05. Suppose you have $12.50 today and you want to know how long it will take you to double your money. Well, here we'll change things up. Okay. So we'll go back. Leona, can I go back now? Okay, so we'll go back. And what we're looking for is the number of years. So this is where we can use our M/per function, number of periods. So you have 1250, and you want to know how long it will take you to double your money. So if you double your money, if it's 1250, it changes into 2500. Our payments are again 0. Our rate of return is 9%. And you want to know how long it'll take. Well, the M/per function you use again. The M/per function is, again, our rate, which is B5. Our payment is 0. Our present value, we said we take as this. So we'll take the present value as negative. And if the present value is negative, then the future value has to be positive. And again, we'll take our type as 0. And so we get 8 years, 0.04, which is a few days. So now the question is, what do you do with this here? Is this 8 years or is it 9 years? What do you think? 8? Okay. So I claim essentially that if you put 8 as your answer, you won't have doubled your money. So when it's saying how long will it take to double, and you're looking for the number of years after which your money will have at least doubled, okay, you have to actually go to the next year up.
Oh, you can't have 0.04.
Yes, you can't. Well, you can't have 0.04 of a year, and if you round it off to 8, I mean, if you round off, that's fine. But if you round off to 8, you will find that after 8 years, you won't have quite 2,500. So when you get an answer like this, and you want to know after how many years will you have at least double your money, instead of rounding off, you want to round up to the next year. So what we'll do then is we'll round up. And so we'll use the round up function. So you will note that round has just round, which is rounding off. Okay? And when you round off, it takes you to the nearest decimal place of your choosing, the nearest unit. You can round down or you can round up. In our case, we want to round up. We want to take it to the next, okay, next place. So we want to round up. And this is the number we want to round up. And the number of digits we want to round up to. How many digits do we want to round up to?
0.
0, so.
One is, I think it means percent.
1 0 then?
Well, Nick said when they say number of digits, he says Excel means the number of decimal digits. Huh? Oh. It's not any, again, have you changed the font or?
Yeah.
Actually, Nick.
Can you go back on that box?
On this box?
Yes.
So we did the roundup. Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just forgot a bracket for the actual number.
Okay. So that's the next part there, which is a number of periods. Then we can ask ourselves some other questions. We know essentially we're looking at We're looking at present value, future value. We have these equal payments. So when it comes to the equal payments, then we're dealing with annuities. We know annuities can have payments at the end of each period or at the beginning of each period. Because at the beginning of each period, and you ask George, he'll tell you that's an annuity due, which of course is what they are learning currently in Finance 3227. Okay, so with this annuity due, we can answer certain questions like this. So we'll ask ourselves, suppose you're making regular payments of $250 per year of 5 years and it's earning this interest rate. What is the present value? What is the future value? And so on the payments. If the payments are at the beginning of the year, what is that? And then we'll answer this question here. What happens if the payments don't start right away, but start at some point in time in the future? With this situation, then you have what's called a deferred annuity. Okay, so let's go back here. Well, we can leave this here. And we'll just put in the numbers that we need. So first we want to find the future value. And we want to find the present value. And then we want to find the present value of an annuity due. And finally, we want to find the present value Okay, so what we have is we have annual payments of $250. Right now we have 0 here, 0 here, and we're earning 8%. And the number of years right now is 5. So to find the future value then, we use the future value function. And you guys don't have to wait for me. I'm sure you can do this, right, Nathan? Okay. So, Nathan, what did you get for future value?
I don't have that one yet.
Okay. Sarah, what did you get for present value?
Not that far.
Okay. So, future our rate is 8%. Number of periods is 5. Our payment is, so let's put our payment as negative. Our present value is 0. And for the first one, we put in type 0.
Click on that one more time. Futureize.
Hmm?
Can you click on the Futureize?
This one here?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is all just the basics. And once we're comfortable with the basics, then we can start using these basics to answer more interesting questions. One of the main questions then that these time value of money calculations are used for is for financial planning. Okay, so we'll get to dealing with financial planning questions using this time value of money functions. Okay? Okay. And you can ask Ryan all about that. PV. Ryan, rumor has it you want to be a wealth manager. And you dream of being filthy rich. Is this true? Yeah. Number of periods of 5. Our payments, we'll put in minus that. Our future value is 0. And for this guy here is type 0. So I should point out that once you have this future value, there is another way to compute this present value, right, Matt? That is, this is the future value of all these cash flows. So what you can do to find this present value is you can actually take this future value as a lump sum and discount it back today. So let's do that on the side, just to make sure. And when I say this, I'm doing it for, aside from just showing you that it works, it turns out that sometimes the people who write these programs with Excel sometimes have mistakes in the macros. So if it doesn't work, it's actually not that we did something wrong, it's that Excel's function is wrong. And this has happened, it happens actually fairly often, and then all you do is you just send Excel an email saying this function isn't working well, and they'll go in and fix it, that's all. So let's check to make sure Excel's functions are working properly. Okay. So we'll take our PV here, and our rate is still 8%. Our number of periods is still 5. This time we'll put in 0 payments, but we'll put in this guy here as our future value, and type 0. So it works out. So Excel is working. Right? Make sense? Okay. For the present value due, everything is the same except instead of 0, we'll put in 1. And so that's sure. That's that. Again, we can see the difference between this and this. This guy here is simply this amount just moved forward 1 space, but let's not worry about that. So let's do the deferred. And by deferred, what we're saying is we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Here 6. And then you start to receive the 250. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You start to receive the 250, and you start to receive the 250. Actually, I think it's here. So the question says the first payment is made in 6 years at the year end. So the first payment happens here. This is end of year 6, right? And so it actually goes on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 250. Right, Colton? So how do we find what the present value of this is? Kira, what do we do? You've done 3227. So we're going to essentially use the present value function twice. One is to find the present value of these annuities. And so we'll take this PV, and that's what we have here, all of this. But what this is saying is that instead of this being 998 here, what it is it's 998 here. Right? Is that right, George? And so what we do then is we embed that inside another PV function. And we're looking at the same rate. It is often the case that the rate here may be different from the rate. So the rate that happens in this period here could be different from the rate that happens in this period here. So you should sort of just pay attention to what the question is like. So our rate, our number of periods, It turns out, how many periods are we dealing with, Simara? 5 or 6? The first payment is made at the end of year 6, essentially. So here, 6 years from it. Well, maybe should have been a little bit more precise, but at the end of year 6. And so it turns out that you always, whenever you have this here, you're always finding the present value as of one period before the first payment. So we're actually dealing with 5. That is, this 998 is the present value as of year 5. And so what we're doing is we're taking this back now to find the present value as of year 0. Our payment is 0 because in between here and here, there are no payments. And then future value, we'll put a negative there. And then you can put 0. Okay.
You just put a negative for the present value?
Yes, that is, we found this amount here, but now we're taking this as our future value, and so we'll now put a negative in front of it. So,
Just put the 0 at the end of the box.
what? Sorry. So let's do what most of you had done already, and let me name this as our rate. So that will right. So I named the interest rate as rate, so we can see what's going on in there. Yes. Does anyone need a laptop? You're good? I think we're good today. It's okay. Okay. And of course, you could name this as N. I left it here because we're dealing with 2 different number of periods.
Can you explain that one more time, like how you what those like?
Okay, so let's go back here and say the first time what we had was we had year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we had 250, 250, and so on, and we have 250. And when we found the present value of all of this, okay, all of this, we found the present value times 0 is equal to 998.1, something like that. This was the first, this was essentially this regular annuity here, which was this guy. Then we said, well, suppose instead of this happening here, suppose this wasn't your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but now it was this. So it's the same thing where you have your 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and you have 250, 250, 250. Oh, I guess it's just 10. What? 6, 7, 8, 10. 250. Okay? But instead of finding it here, this of course is your 5. What you want to do is you want to find it here. You want to find PV at time 0. So you do the first step as usual, But when you do the first step, what you're finding is actually not PV0, but PV5. Right? And now you need to take this guy here and take this back to your zero. So you need to use the PV function twice. The first time to find this, but this happens now in year 5. The second time, take it down here. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's what we did. This first PV here was to find this, and then the second PV was to find then what happens at year 0. So this situation is called then a deferred annuity.
The merge to back to periods.
Yes, we're actually going back 10 period. But so you could ask yourself, what's the future value of this? In year 10, what's the future value? So if you started saving money, $250 every year, how much would you have in year 10? And there are two ways you can answer this. One way is you simply find the future value of this annuity, which is this guy here. We've already found it. 1465. So, yeah, we've already found that. So we know what that is, yeah? The other way is to take this amount that we found, 679, .34, and take all of this to here. That one time here. Move it forward 10 years and see what you get. So why don't you do that now? Why don't you take this guy here, take it forward 10 years and see what you get. So our rate is still 8%. Our number of periods is now 10 years. Our payment is 0. Our present value is this guy here. And we get the same thing. Right? Sorry? So let's so all we did was we carried this guy here forward 10 years. Now we get the same thing. Okay. So Simar says this is easy. So really, let's kick it up a notch, right, Simar? Okay. So let's kick it up a notch. The first thing to kick it up, or the first thing we can say is that there is a special kind of annuity where the cash payments happen every year and so on, but they go on forever. Okay? So this then is called a perpetuity. Excel, to my knowledge, doesn't have a built-in perpetuity function. However, the formula for perpetuity is remarkably simple, right? And so you can just type in the formula yourself. We know the PV of a perpetuity, the present value of a perpetuity, is simply equal to your payment divided by K. What did we call K? Our rate. Yeah. And so the formula is remarkably simple. So finding the present value of perpetuity, you don't need a built-in formula for function for that, because the formula is so simple. However, when you have this situation here, where your payments are not constant per se, your payments would have been constant, but they are growing at a constant rate. Okay, and there are two situations, especially when it comes to financial planning, where we see this happen. One is the payments may tend to grow at the rate of inflation. Okay? So you decide that you are going to make an investment, and your investment, for instance, is what's called indexed to inflation. So there are many GICs or investments where you index it to inflation. So you're saying, we'll pay you 250 every year, but then if there's inflation, you tack on what inflation is. So it's indexed to inflation. The second thing is when you have a salary, for instance, and your salary is, say, $30,000 a year, most negotiated salaries, so most salaries that occur with unionized labor, the salaries are adjusted every year according to some index. Usually, they link it to inflation plus something. It's called a cost of living adjustment. Okay? And so for most unionized workers, including all the professors here at Mount Royal, and we are a member of the union, your salaries then grow at this cost of living adjustment. It's supposed to. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to just digress. You guys heard what happened to Nortel recently?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, when you hear of things like that, you just want to go out and slap somebody. Nortel essentially filed for bankruptcy, and Nortel had all these retired people who were making a pension. When they filed for bankruptcy, of course, the pension was shut down, and all the pensioners had to line up all the other creditors to try and collect. Nortel has been in bankruptcy for almost 10, actually slightly over 10 years now. And in all that time, the pensioners have not been able to receive the pension that they've been promised because it's been in bankruptcy. There's a pensioner, for instance, who has a disability, and, well, it's not just him, there's a particular disability, and all they're looking for is $44 million in what they owe them for the last 10 years to pay them, so they can pay all this debt that they owe to deal with the disability. Okay? But they refuse to pay them. They say, well, we're in bankruptcy proceedings, and until everything is settled, we won't pay you. In the meantime, the chief executive officer, and CFO, and so on, who took Nortel into bankruptcy, have been collecting their pay. And the lawyers who have been dealing with the bankruptcy have collected over $2 billion in lawyers' fees, and they've been paid. But here's a disabled pensioner, can't get any money. Don't you feel like going out and slapping someone? Andrew.
Someone has gone and slapped someone. Unfortunately, the law is not retroactive. The NDP brought in a bill in 2007 to deal with it. However, like I said, it's not retroactive,
Okay.
so it shouldn't happen to any other pensioners in the future.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness. So how do you deal essentially with these cost of living adjustments here? Well, to do it then, whenever you have a payment that is growing at a constant rate, we call it then a graduated annuity. And there are two adjustments you make. The first adjustment is that instead of using your regular rate, which would be I, you use an adjusted rate, okay? And how do you make the adjustment? Well, you tack on this formula here, where G is the growth rate in the payment. So if it's inflation, G will be your inflation. If it's your COLA, your cost of living adjustment, G would be that. And then once you use this, once you calculate what this artificial I is, okay? This proxy I, you use this in your formula, and you get the present value. Once you get that PV to find the actual PV, then you divide by 1 plus G. Now, you're wondering who came up with this? And so the book doesn't explain, so bear with me. I do like a little bit of math. So I just went through the math myself because I knew Nick would be interested. Okay? This is the regular PV formula, essentially. Okay? And it's saying then that if your payment is growing, so if your payment is growing at I, at this rate G, and you compare the PV formula for this with the regular PV formula, we can see that the difference is simply 1 over I is now captured by this 1 plus I. And there is this 1 plus G factor. So all you do is you substitute for I star, and you just calculate this out. And you divide by 1 plus G at the end. So it's not really shall we say magic, it's just algebra, yeah? That we use to get this.
It's kind of like that.
Huh?
Algebra's kind of like that.
Oh, okay. So let's see if there is an example here. Or let's take an example here. And so let's add in insert. So we'll delete all of this and we'll go back to our formula. Inflation. Everything is the same except inflation is growing at a particular rate. Okay? Now let's go back to what we did before here, and let's allow inflation to grow at some nice rate where we can pick the rate of inflation. Okay? So you want to see what will the impact of inflation be on essentially your future value here. I'm going to find the present value first and then future value next. Happens. Okay, our future value next. Okay? So we're going to deal with just those guys here. So we'll deal with just these guys here. So instead of this, we can use a combo box, right? Should we do that? Or maybe okay, so let's put a combo box in there to allow us to adjust inflation. Yeah? So we will go to our developer and we will add in then this list box. And
Which is the combo box again?
developer, insert. So now we'll format this. We have an input range. Actually, this, what do you think, Jordan? Perhaps a data validation box might be better. Simar, what do you think? Simar says a spin button maybe. The choice is yours. Mackenzie, we have a choice between three things. We can use the data validation tool, which gives you a list. We can use the combo box, or we can use a spin button. Spin button, okay. And there were some nice spin buttons in the assignment, which was great. So our spin button, and we format this. Our current value 0, minimum value 0, maximum 100% is maximum inflation. Let's allow inflation to grow by 0.5. What do you think? 0.5, so let's take it to 2. Oh, I want, yeah. Maximum value, I'm going to put 200. I'll allow it to change by 0.5. And so our cell link, we'll take our cell link to be C7. So what I did was I linked the cell behind this. And we said for the spin button, we'll often do that. And so over here, we'll essentially take equal C7 divided by 200. And that'll give us our percent. So now if we increase, instead of, the reason why I did 200 was that instead of it increasing by 1%, it now increases by 0.5. It goes from 0.5 to 1, 1.5 to 2, 2.5 to 3. So this, sorry. Let me move this guy a bit to the side and to show essentially our spin button is controlling this cell here. So our spin button is controlling this cell here. And this cell goes from 0 to 200. And this is going to divide what is in this cell by 200 to change it to percent. Right? Anybody good?
I just can't move my developer handle.
I didn't even have developer.
Sorry?
I'm not even able to pull up that.
Oh, the developer tab for you. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe this clear for the extra.
Yeah. You need to do some spread.
Yes.
You know, I didn't know what this word meant when I was your age. It was only when I was older and I went to Trinidad. I found out what to talk on top. This is not spread. Yeah. So there's an underground cable and so and water is actually fresh water, but it's sitting on top of the salt water. So you have to put it all the way down. You go to fresh water, you get to the seawater, then you can dive up under the cable, come up and get very into. But inside the cable, you have to climb, you have to do some spelunking to get down there. Okay, enough of that. So you guys, are we good with this? So we said typically you'll hide your helper cell by the spin button. And so now we want to find the present value. So we said the first thing we do, of course, is that instead of I, we put in equal 1 plus I, which is our rate here. Okay? So what we're doing is we're going to take this here instead of I. Okay? Let's find out what that looks like first of all. 1 plus our rate divided by 1 plus our inflation, okay, then minus 1. If you're not comfortable just looking at it this way, since this follows the rules of BODMAS, we can leave it like this, but if you still want to put the bracket around it, just want to be sure, you can do that as well. Okay. So this is our pseudo interest rate. It's our adjusted interest rate that we need to deal with this graduated or cost of living adjustment. So what does that look like? It looks essentially like this. It's 7%. It's roughly this guy minus this. It's not quite that, but it's roughly that. Yeah? It adjusts for inflation that way. And so we're going to take this as our rate. So we now find the PV using that as our rate. Okay. Right. So all of this is our rate. Now you could, of course, make a helper cell. You could take this and put it by the side somewhere here where it calculates that by the side, and then use that in your rate. You could do that. Okay? If you're, would you do that if it was you?
I don't even know what to ask.
Okay. Let's let's do that then. Let's, that's what I'm saying here. Okay. Our adjusted I. So that's essentially what we did here, right? We adjusted the rate. And so instead of using 8%, we can now use 7.46%. So in our PV formula, we can just use this adjusted rate. So this is the first adjustment. Instead of using 8%, we'll use this adjusted rate. All right. So we'll use this guy here. So this is just using a helper cell. Is that better?
Where did that?
It comes from here. When dealing with inflation or cost of living adjustment, we're saying you make these two assumptions. First, instead of using I in your formula, you use this adjusted I. And that's what this guy is here.
Can you put your thing back on 7.46?
Oh, so yeah.
So instead of using I, you use this adjusted I.
So you just copy your formula from there?
I just took this formula here and put it here. 1 plus I divided by 1 plus B7. What do you think, Reed? Am I making any sense here? Okay. No? You're done? So what I had done initially was, instead of using a helper cell, I had simply taken this formula and plugged it into this. Okay? But we can leave it that way. And so now we have our adjusted I. We now find our PV using this adjusted I. Right? And so we take this as our rate. Our number of periods is still 5 years. Our payment then, we're still taking it as 250, but we know it's growing at 0.5%. Or, do you have yours at 0.5 or 1? I have it. 0.5 is good. And our future value is 0, and end of year 0. So that's what you got. So this is the present value if it's growing at 5%. And we can see now that if it grows at 1%, that's our present value. If it's growing at 1.5% and so on, we can see what the present value is growing. See? Once again, to find the future value, okay, yes.
Don't we need to then divide to the second step of the adjustment?
Okay, so Taylor says we forgot one step. Is he right, Kim? That is, we've made this adjustment here, so we've done this first one, but now we need to do the second step. And so the second step then is this PV divided by 1 plus G. Is our growth rate. So that's the second step. So now I'd like to say that I deliberately left out that step just to make sure you're paying attention. But that's just I just okay. So that is now. You could of course ask yourself, what is the future value of all of that? So using the adjustments that we have, you can figure out algebraically, okay, what the future value would look like. But the easiest thing to do is, since these adjustments work for the present value, once you find the present value here, you find the future value simply by taking the future value at 8%, 5 years, 0 payments, and you now take this as your present value, right? At the beginning of year, and find what the future value is. So in the past, let me check here. You still have that old amount? What was the old amount? 1466. So in the past, without any inflation, if these weren't growing at inflation, we had that this was 1466, right? But now it's growing at inflation, not by much, just 0.5%, but it's grown to 1480. And if, of course, this increases, then we can see what this grows to as well.
For some reason, the spin button stopped adjusting.
Sorry?
The spin button stopped adjusting it. It was format control, and it was like minimum value 0, max 200, if you want to change one, right?
And what cell do you use?
7.
Okay, press enter or OK. And then click another cell and you have to click off the spin button to have it active, right?
Mine won't do it once the big one's one.
You've got the spin button working,
I got it working, yeah.
and yours is increasing by 1.
Yeah, only it won't go lower than that, like I can't do a 0.5%. So yeah, outside of it.
Divided by 2. And if you want to go even better than that, you can divide by 1,000. So you'll have it increasing by 0.1%.
So if you need it less than 1, you just have to put it in 1.
Okay. So I think then, I think we have all the machinery we kind of need. We know about deferred annuities and growing and so on. And so now we can answer a question then that looks like this. We can answer then questions then about retirement. Because we have all the machinery we need. So we're saying, suppose for instance, you decide that when you retire, you will need $125,000 a year. What do you think, Simar? Does that seem reasonable? Is that a little or a lot? To live on? Well, it depends then on what standard of living you're used to. If you're used to traveling twice a year to exotic places, if you drive a Lamborghini, just the cost of maintaining that stuff is quite a lot. If you're like Donald Trump, when Donald Trump filed for bankruptcy, by the way, this was way back in the 1990s, when he filed for bankruptcy, his company, they took him to the bankruptcy courts, and the bankruptcy courts put him on a fixed income per month. And he said, that's crazy. I can't live on that. You know how much it was? $437,000 a month. He says, I can't live on that. He has a summer home in Florida that has 26 servants. Who's going to take it? Right? $437,000 a month. So it depends on your standard of living. For some people, $125,000 a year is okay. Some people may think that's a lot, but for Donald Trump, that's madness. Yeah.
we also take into account the fact that that's looking at $125,000 in 30 years?
Well, yes, that's true. So
It's really
in
only
30 years.
$69,000.
So, but it depends. I mean, right now with inflation at 1%, $125,000 in 30 years, you can do what the math is here. How much in present value dollar terms? It's probably about 90,000 maybe.
At 1%, you're looking at 92.
92, yeah. So,
At 2%, it's 69.
so, I mean, it's still not bad to live on. Now, having said that, okay, personally, I don't think it's. So it's not that I have a high standard of living. It's my wife. Okay. But let's just say this is what you've decided. And for your next assignment, of course, it's there. For your next assignment, what you have is you have a current salary that's growing at a certain amount. And you have decided that it's because of something, there's a link to a Fortune magazine article where it shows essentially that most people can be comfortable living on something at 50 to 70% of their annual salary when they retire. Okay, so once you retire, you're comfortable living 50 to 70% of their annual salary. So if your salary is growing, by the time you retire, you figure out what it is, and then you say, okay, I need 70% of that to live on for the next 35 years. So here we've given 30 years until retirement, and the years in retirement is 35. So we don't know what our age is right now. We've taken this that we have 30 years to retirement. So for instance, our age could be 30. So we're going to retire at 60, and then we're assuming we'll live to 95. So that's the plan. In your assignment, you know what your current age is, and you have some idea as to how long you will live. You get to decide when to retire. So you build a model that will allow you to decide when do you retire at 55 or 60 or 65. These days, people are working for 70. 40. He wants to retire at 40. What will you do with the rest of your life?
That's a banker. You'll be burned out by then anyway.
Oh, that's true. So the rate of return before retirement is 8%. We know, of course, that most people, when you are saving for retirement, you take on a little bit more risk. But once you move into retirement, you take your money out of your RESP into what's it called? Well, RESP, when you retire, you put your money into
RIF.
a RIF, okay, a registered retirement income fund, and so it's less risk. So the amount you get is a lot lower. These days, of course, you're looking at making 1 to 1.5%, if that, okay, in your RIFs. So things are really tough for people who are retiring now and they haven't saved up tons of money. And so now we want to figure out how much do we need to invest in order to meet our retirement. So we have to break this question down into different steps. And so this requires that you know the finance behind this, the time value of money calculations necessary. And once you know these time value of money calculations that are necessary, you then use the built-in functions to answer the questions. Okay. So let's just start with the first one, and we'll finish up on next Monday. How much will you need when you retire? So Val, how much will you need when you retire? So we're now dealing with a deferred annuity. And the deferred annuity is here, except that instead of $250 every year, it's $125,000 every year. And instead of 5 years, it's 35 years. So how much will you need when you retire? That's how much will you need then? Well, we can answer that question, okay? So it's simply then PV. Oh, I think the formula is already in there. Yep.
So my only thing with the formula that's there is you wouldn't want the $125,000 at the end of every year. You'd want it at the beginning of the year so you can spend it throughout the year.
Okay, so if you are specifically putting that into your model, you would essentially state it somewhere. And so George did this quite nicely with his first assignment. He was one of the few people that actually did some labeling or commenting. So he had these text boxes to explain what was going on in his financial statement analysis and so on. So if you lump things together, for instance, in a consolidated account, say for instance your cash flow statement, it's a good idea to let people know what's in that other liabilities, okay, by putting some comments or something. So yes, so Taylor, if you did that, then you would put a comment here or a text box that would say the annual retirement income, okay, is going to be paid at the beginning of the year. In which case, this formula would change. Instead of having a 0 here, you have a 1. So that's okay. He insists on that. Let's keep Taylor happy. This is how much you need at retirement. Almost $2 million. Nick, you think you'll make it? You need almost $2 million in 30 years. So you have to start saving real quick. Okay. What investment is required today? Well, if you are going to put aside a lump sum of money today to make this $2 million, how much would you need to put aside? That's what the next question is asking. And so we can then do this. It's not, well, it's enough. I don't know if you have $190,000 sitting by, but it works out to be $190,000. So what we do is we take this amount here, and we're saying then this is our future value. And if you put 100 and want to find out what the present value is of this, note that we're using 8% to find the present value. Over here, when we were finding how much we need at retirement, we were using 6%. Okay? And in your assignment, what happens is before retirement, there is a certain level of inflation you expect. Post-retirement, there's a different level of inflation that you expect. So you have to deal when you're selling graduated annuities. Okay? Now you're saying, well, I don't have $190,000, so let me delete this and let's put that formula in. I don't have $190,000. So if I want to save every year, how much will I need to save? So we'll put in our payment. So this is our payment function. And our payment says we're using 8% and we're going for 30 periods until retirement. Our present value is 0 for now. Our future value is minus the $2 million we're going to make, and we're saving at the end of every year. And so this is how much we'll need. We'll need to put aside $16,000. Now, of course, if you know what your salary is, if, for instance, you are making, say, 54, say you're making 51,000, roughly speaking. If you're making 51,000, then this is saying you need to put aside 1/3 of your salary, every year, which is quite a lot. But that's what it's telling you. And so you can start asking yourself, is that reasonable? Then you start asking, well, suppose instead of doing this, I want to make some investment today, plus I want to make an annual investment. Well, you can decide then on this. You can say, suppose I put 20,000 in today, and now I include that in my. So I'm making these payments, but my amount that here, my present value is this guy here, V8. So, so this is the cash inflow into the account, and it turns out then it drops down to 15,000. So you put 20,000 in now, and then 15,000 every year for the next 30 years. Okay, that's it for today. I'm not saving this per se because I kept deleting what I had done already. So, but the video is at least up there.